Hey guys, tonight we're taking a rather peculiar stroll through one of the stranger corners of Greek mythology. Imagine this, a peaceful evening under the velvet sky, the stars twinkling above. And there you are, wandering through a soft meadow, when suddenly you see a cloud walking past you. Not floating gently above, no. This cloud has legs. It's trotting along like it's on a mission. Oh yes, this isn't just any cloud. It's a disguised lady on the run from the Queen of the Gods herself. Welcome to the absurd world of Greek myths, where clouds can turn into cows, and gods behave worse than your most dramatic neighbour. And honestly, you wouldn't survive 5 minutes in these stories. The drama alone would wipe you out faster than you can say Mount Olympus. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also feel free to drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. I always love knowing where my sleepy little history travelers are drifting off. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wander along a winding path, the air thick with that familiar mix of sea breeze and olive groves. Somewhere off in the distance you hear the gentle murmurs of Olympus itself, where the gods are up to their usual nonsense. As you meander, your eyes catch sight of something downright bizarre. A fluffy white cloud, no bigger than a small cottage, is casually strolling through a field of wildflowers. Yes, strolling with legs. The cloud glides across the grass, seemingly unbothered by the fact that it's breaking every law of nature. You blink once, twice. But no, it's still there. Curiosity tugs at you. You take a cautious step closer. The cloud seems to shimmer in the moonlight, glowing with an otherworldly silver hue. And then, oh dear, you realize it isn't just a cloud. It's moving too purposefully. It's hiding something. You creep forward, the grass crunching softly beneath your feet. And soon you're close enough to hear whispers. The cloud is mumbling. Or rather, the person inside the cloud is mumbling. That's when it hits you. You've stumbled upon Zeus himself, king of the gods, master of the skies, and apparently a frequent visitor to the bad ideas department. He's attempting one of his infamous disguises, hiding his latest affair in plain sight. Tonight's lucky, or perhaps very unlucky, woman happens to be Io, a mortal priestess who clearly has no clue what she's signed up for. And Zeus, well, he's draped her in this cloud to shield her from Hera's ever-watchful gaze. You can't help but chuckle. It's the classic nothing to see here move, except, involving divine shape-shifting and weather manipulation. You watch as Zeus glances nervously over his shoulder, muttering something about Hera's getting suspicious again. His plan? Keep Io hidden under a literal cloud. Because apparently when you're the god of the sky, subtlety means turning your problems into fluffy white objects. The cloud sways a bit as Io shifts uncomfortably within it, her human form struggling against the strange, soft prison. You almost feel bad for her. Almost. But then you remember, this is Greek mythology. Nobody really wins here. As you stand there half in awe, half in disbelief, you start to wonder just how long Zeus can keep up this ridiculous charade. After all, Hera isn't exactly known for her forgiving nature or her lack of curiosity. The breeze picks up slightly, and the scent of lavender drifts through the air. Somewhere nearby, a cicada begins to sing its steady nighttime tune. You lean against an old olive tree, amused by the absurdity of it all. And as the cloud drifts further down the path, you can't help but whisper to yourself, well, this is going to end horribly. Because you already know, Hera always finds out. And in the back of your mind, a quiet little fact pops up. Many historians still argue about just how widespread these myths were in ancient times, and whether stories like Io's were meant to warn people, or simply entertain them around flickering fires. Either way, tonight you're in for the full spectacle. And that walking cloud, it's just the beginning. You follow the odd little cloud as it drifts along, its fluffy edges tinged with moonlight, until it comes to a stop near an enormous marble structure looming ahead. You know this place immediately. It's Olympus, the grand palace of the gods, perched high above mortal lands, where drama is practically the house specialty. You step cautiously into the grand hall, where the air shimmers with divine energy and smells faintly of roasted ambrosia and suspicious behaviour. At the very centre, seated upon a throne carved from storm clouds and crackling with faint lightning, is Zeus himself. He looks every bit the part, thick beard, eyes like summer storms, and a smug grin that could probably start its own forest fire. You can't help but notice how relaxed he seems, lounging there like he's got everything under control, even though you both know otherwise. He lazily waves a hand, sending a servant scurrying off with a goblet of nectar, while another immortal polishes his thunderbolts. As you linger at the edge of the room, Zeus leans back and mutters to himself, "Hera's not going to like this one bit." He taps his fingers against the armrest, clearly scheming. You glance around and notice the cloud, Io's awkward hiding place, hovering in a corner, trembling slightly. Honestly, it's not the most convincing disguise. You've seen toddlers hide more effectively during a game of hide-and-seek. Zeus, however, seems determined. He's come up with a brilliant plan, and oh, he's just so proud of it. He's convinced that by stashing Io in cloud form and keeping her nearby, he can avoid suspicion. After all, what's a walking cloud doing in Olympus? Nothing to see here, obviously. You can't help but snort softly at the absurdity of it. This isn't a clever heist. It's more like watching someone try to hide a watermelon under a hat. And yet, Zeus is committed to the bit. He leans forward, his voice low and conspiratorial, whispering to himself about how Hera's busy with some other divine squabble, probably something about gold-tipped sandals, or who forgot to refill the nectar fountain. But deep down, you sense it. He's nervous, and rightfully so, because if there's one thing you've picked up from wandering these mythic halls, it's that nobody outsmarts Hera. Not for long, anyway. As you observe Zeus rehearsing lines to explain the totally normal cloud that's now part of the decor, you recall that, amusingly enough, some ancient scholars have argued that these tales were less about moral lessons and more about poking fun at the gods themselves. After all, what better way to entertain the masses than by imagining their rulers getting tangled up in cosmic soap operas? Zeus stands abruptly, adjusting his robe dramatically, and with a self-satisfied grin announces to the empty hall, "This time I've thought of everything." "Sure you have, big guy." Suddenly a distant rumble echoes through the halls, not thunder, but the unmistakable sound of Hera's footsteps approaching. You can almost feel the temperature drop as her presence nears. Zeus stiffens immediately, his bravado melting faster than a wax statue under the summer sun. He hastily fluffs the cloud, muttering about adding extra density to keep Io fully hidden. You suppress a chuckle as you watch him scramble, and for a moment it's hard not to feel like you're watching a poorly directed stage play, with Zeus as the overconfident lead and a suspiciously wobbly prop cloud. But in true Olympus fashion, you know things are about to spiral in spectacular fashion. Somewhere behind you, the great bronze doors creak open, and a breeze scented with pomegranate and cold iron sweeps through. Hera has arrived. She doesn't say a word at first. She doesn't need to. The silence speaks volumes. Zeus swallows hard, suddenly very interested in the empty goblet beside his throne. He offers her a grin so forced it practically cracks his face in half. "Darling," he says, his voice a tad too cheerful. "How lovely of you to visit." Hera arches an eyebrow, and you can feel the weight of her gaze sweeping across the room. It lingers, just for a second, on that suspicious little cloud quivering near the corner. Oh no, she's noticed. And here you are, stuck right in the middle of it all, bearing witness to yet another one of those legendary marital discussions that always end with something, or someone, getting turned into an unfortunate shape. As Hera's eyes narrow ever so slightly, you think to yourself, "Oh, this is going to be good." And just as you suspected, historians still debate whether tales like these were intended as cautionary fables or simply exaggerated accounts meant to keep dinner parties lively. One thing's for certain. You're definitely not going to fall asleep yet. The real fun is just beginning. You can practically feel the tension in the air, thickening like syrup, heavy and sweet, as Hera strides deeper into the hall. Her gown swishes with each deliberate step, the fabric shimmering like molten silver, and her crown gleams under the flicker of torchlight. Every immortal present suddenly finds themselves busy, polishing, sweeping, avoiding eye contact. You, however, stay rooted in place. It's too good to miss. Hera's eyes slowly scan the room, lingering ever so briefly on the strangely stationary cloud. Her lips curl into a polite, utterly terrifying smile. You can almost hear her thoughts. "Really, Zeus? A cloud? How original." Zeus, ever the master of denial, clears his throat and gestures broadly toward the scenery outside, as though trying to redirect her gaze. "Lovely weather we're having," he says, voice strained but sunny, as if hoping she'll believe he's suddenly become fascinated by meteorology. You have to stifle a laugh. This is the equivalent of saying, "Look at that wallpaper," during an argument to change the subject. But Hera, well, she isn't one to fall for cheap tricks. She circles the room, slowly, deliberately, like a cat stalking prey. Every step echoes, her golden sandals tapping rhythmically against the marble. Finally, she stops right beside the trembling cloud. She raises an eyebrow, tapping her chin with one delicate finger, and says, oh so sweetly, "Darling, what's this?" Zeus freezes. For a heartbeat, even the air holds still. He laughs nervously, a sound somewhere between a hiccup and a wheeze, and replies, "Oh, that? Just a passing cloud. Nothing unusual, very common this time of year." You can't believe what you're hearing. You half expect him to follow it up with, "It came with the breeze." Hera doesn't blink. She reaches out, and with a grace that's somehow both elegant and menacing, she gives the cloud a gentle prod. It jiggles slightly, definitely not cloud-like behavior. Her smile widens. "Oh?" She hums, drawing out the word. So soft, almost nervous. You swear you see her eyes flash for just a moment. Zeus's face turns several shades paler, and he fumbles for an explanation, hands flailing in the air like a man trying to swat away invisible flies. It's a nervous cloud, very rare species. You know how strange the weather's been lately. You almost lose it right there, but Hera isn't fooled, not for a second. She leans in closer to the cloud and whispers something only it, and you, conveniently lurking nearby, can hear. "I know exactly who you are, my dear." The cloud shudders violently, and you spot two terrified eyes peeking out from within the fluffy edges. Io, busted. And here comes the best part. Hera doesn't explode. No thunder, no screams. She simply smiles that razor-sharp smile of hers and turns back to Zeus. "How thoughtful of you," she purrs, "to keep such a fascinating creature here. Surely you won't mind if I Take it as a gift? Zeus's mouth opens and closes like a fish gasping for air. But what can he do? Refusing would be too obvious, and Hera knows it. Oh, she plays this game far too well. Of course, my love, he manages to choke out, his voice barely above a squeak. Anything for you. With the grace of a queen accepting a prize at a grand festival, Hera gestures, and in a swirl of divine magic the cloud unravels. There, standing awkwardly in the middle of the room, is Io, no longer hidden, wide-eyed with fear. But before anyone can react, Hera's magic sweeps over her like a tidal wave. In an instant, Io is transformed. Her human form dissolves, and in its place stands a sleek white cow, its eyes still unmistakably human, filled with dread and confusion. A cow. A pristine, glossy cow. You stare in stunned fascination as Hera pats the new bovine gently on the head, smiling sweetly all the while. There, she says, her voice dripping with triumph. Much better, don't you agree, darling? Zeus looks like he's aged a century in mere moments, utterly defeated. And you? You're trying your absolute hardest not to laugh out loud, because really, how else could this have ended? Hera doesn't just catch cheaters, she collects trophies. As Io the cow lets out a soft, mournful moo, you can't help but marvel at the absurdity of it all. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you recall that historians still squabble over whether this tale was a moral warning about divine wrath, or simply an ancient joke about marital revenge. Either way, you now find yourself face to face with a woman-turned-cow, a furious goddess, and a god who's clearly lost control of the entire situation. And the night's far from over. You watch as Hera strokes the newly transformed Io, her fingers gliding down the cow's pristine white coat with a kind of sinister tenderness. There's something unsettling about the way she hums softly, like she's petting a beloved lapdog instead of a cursed woman. Zeus, meanwhile, is frozen in place, shoulders slumped, thunderbolt forgotten, looking like a schoolboy caught sneaking dessert before dinner. Hera turns toward him, that unsettling smile still curling her lips. You know, she says casually, I've always wanted a little pet to keep me company. You can't help but think, oh no, here it comes. And yes, she continues, her voice as smooth as olive oil, she'll need a proper guardian, of course, someone trustworthy, someone who never sleeps. Zeus visibly pales. He knows exactly where this is headed. And honestly, so do you. You trail behind as Hera, still cradling Io's cow-shaped chin with an unsettling fondness, strides out of the great hall. Her steps are deliberate, echoing against the marble floors. Argus! She calls out. And from the shadows emerges a figure that sends a shiver down your spine. Argus Panoptes, known far and wide as the all-seeing one. His body is covered with eyes, hundreds of them, blinking independently, always watching. They pepper his arms, his chest, even the back of his hands. You try not to stare, but it's impossible to look away. It's like standing in front of a field of daisies, except each petal is watching your every move. Argus bows before Hera, though his many eyes stay wide open, scanning the surroundings. I have a task for you, Hera says sweetly, almost as if she's offering him a reward. Take this lovely creature and watch over her. Never let her out of your sight, day or night. Argus nods silently. Of course he agrees. He's not exactly the chatty type. And really, with that many eyes, losing track of anything isn't likely. You can't help but grimace as you watch him take hold of Io's tether, leading the poor cow away. She looks back at you with wide, sorrowful eyes, her hooves dragging reluctantly across the stone. Zeus stands there still dumbfounded, muttering under his breath about unfair tactics, and too many eyeballs. You follow at a careful distance as Hera watches her new pet disappear down the winding mountain path, guarded by a living wall of eyes. And in the back of your mind you can't help but think, this is peak pettiness, even by Greek god standards. Not only did Hera turn her rival into a cow, but she also assigned her the world's most suffocating babysitter. You lean against a column, shaking your head with a wry smile. Somewhere some ancient scribe probably had far too much fun writing this part of the myth. And, amusingly enough, historians still argue whether Argus was meant to symbolize vigilance, punishment, or just a really unsettling night watchman. But there's no time to linger on that thought. Because as you watch Hera return to her throne, her gown sweeping behind her, you can sense it. She's far from finished. Her schemes run deeper than even Zeus can imagine. Io's story isn't over yet, and neither is yours. You watch from a quiet perch as Argus leads Io, the mournful white cow, down from Olympus and out into the mortal lands below. His many eyes gleam in the moonlight, each one swiveling independently, never blinking in unison. It's unsettling to watch, and you quickly realize that trying to sneak past him would be as hopeless as trying to outrun your own shadow. Io trudges alongside him, hooves clopping softly against the rocky ground. She's clearly exhausted, her body sagging with every step, yet Argus shows no sympathy. He just marches on, every eye locked on her, some watching the road, others scanning the hills and trees, and still others staring directly at her, ensuring she can't even sigh without him noticing. You follow from a safe distance, feeling like some invisible observer caught in a bizarre dream. And frankly, you're starting to wonder what's more absurd. The fact that a woman has been turned into a cow, or the fact that her prison guard looks like a walking surveillance system. As they pass through valleys and fields, you can hear distant villagers murmuring in the night, unaware that a piece of divine drama is unfolding right under their noses. Somewhere nearby, an old shepherd snores by his campfire, completely oblivious to the cow with the human eyes trudging past him. Argus finally leads Io to a meadow at the edge of a dense forest, a place far enough from towns and temples that no mortal would stumble upon them easily. He stakes her to a tree with a silver chain, then settles himself nearby on a smooth rock, folding his arms as his eyes remain wide open, every last one of them. Poor Io lowers her head, her ears flicking at every tiny noise. You can feel her misery, even from where you stand. She lets out a soft, low moo, as if hoping it might wake her from this strange nightmare. But it doesn't. Argus sits there in silence, unblinking and unmoving, an eternal warden under the stars. You can't help but think how awkward this must feel, being a cow chained to a tree under the unceasing gaze of a giant eyeball-covered bodyguard. Honestly, you've had uncomfortable moments before, but this takes the prize. And as the night drags on, you start to realize something else. Hera wasn't just being vengeful. She was making a statement. Io wasn't just a pawn in Zeus's games. She was a warning, displayed for every god and mortal to see. No one crosses Hera without paying a price. Still, you can't help but wonder how long Io can endure this bizarre imprisonment. She's already weary from being hunted and transformed, and now she's bound to a tree, her every breath monitored by a walking monument to sleeplessness. It's said, though many historians still argue about the accuracy, that Argus could rest parts of his body while keeping others awake, allowing him to always remain alert. Some even claim that his eyes took turns sleeping in shifts. Frankly, you find that equal parts fascinating and horrifying. But regardless of whether he naps with half his eyes or none at all, tonight he's clearly wide awake. As the wind stirs the leaves, Io gives another quiet, mournful sound, the kind of noise that cuts straight through your chest. You realize that she's not just trapped in body, she's trapped in mind, fully aware of everything happening around her, unable to speak, unable to cry out, doomed to suffer in silence. You shudder at the thought and pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders. Somewhere high above, hidden among the stars, you know Hera is watching with satisfaction, her plan proceeding exactly as she intended. And in that moment you can't help but wonder, how much longer can this poor girl endure before something or someone finally sets her free? Because if there's one thing you've learned wandering through these myths, it's that nothing ever stays still for long. Not even Argus, especially not when certain tricksters start to take an interest. The night stretches on, calm and quiet, save for the occasional rustling of leaves and the soft, pitiful lowing of Io. You sit nearby, hidden among the shrubs, watching Argus in his eternal vigil. The man is an absolute masterpiece of paranoia. Each of his many eyes swivels and shifts, some peering into the darkness, others locked onto Io, and a few even glancing skyward as if to catch trouble descending from above. Honestly, if paranoia were an Olympic sport, Argus would have more gold medals than Hermes has winged sandals. But you know exactly who's about to enter the scene, and the moment the breeze picks up, carrying with it a faint melody, you realize the trickster has arrived. Hermes. You barely spot him at first. He's good like that. One moment, it's just you, the cow, and the eyeball extravaganza. The next, there he is, strolling casually through the meadow, whistling a cheerful tune, a lyre slung over his shoulder. His presence changes the air itself. The meadow feels lighter, less suffocating. Even the moonlight seems to glimmer a little more playfully. He greets Argus with a wide, disarming smile. "Evening," Hermes says, his voice smooth as olive oil and just as slippery. Argus doesn't respond, but a dozen eyes shift toward him suspiciously. Hermes plops himself down on a nearby rock, as if he's just another traveller passing through, stretching his legs and enjoying the night air. "You must be Argus," Hermes continues, plucking at his lyre. A sweet little tune fills the meadow, soft and soothing. "I've heard of you. A legend, really. So many eyes. You must get all sorts of interesting sights." Argus stares, unmoved. His eyes remain alert, watching every twitch of Hermes's fingers. Hermes chuckles softly and shifts his tune slightly, weaving a lullaby so delicate it almost melts into the wind. It curls around the trees, drapes over the grass, and even you feel its pull. A cozy warmth creeping up your spine, making your eyelids heavy. You shake yourself awake, realizing what's happening. Hermes isn't just playing for fun. He's working his magic, note by note. He keeps playing, chatting in that lazy, friendly way of his, slipping in compliments that sound harmless enough but are loaded with mischief. "You know, I always wondered," Hermes muses, plucking another soft note. "With all those eyes, do you ever get tired? Seems exhausting, honestly." Argus's head tilts ever so slightly, not much but enough for you to notice. The melody sinks deeper, like honey thickening in the cold night air. Hermes's grin widens just a touch, but he doesn't rush. He's a master of patience when he needs to be. Instead, he lets the music do the work, swirling in lazy circles around Argus, each note gently tugging at his heavy lids. And sure enough, it begins to happen. One by one, Argus's eyes start to droop, slowly, reluctantly, like little candle flames flickering out in the breeze. You watch in amazement as the impossible unfolds. A dozen eyes shut, then 24, then more. Hermes doesn't stop. He plays on, soft and sweet, weaving his spell tighter with every passing second. The forest itself seems to lean in, captivated by the melody. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, Argus's last eye closes. His great hulking form slumps against the rock, snoring softly, every eye sealed in peaceful slumber. You stare, stunned, unable to believe what you're seeing. Argus, the never-sleeping sentinel, has been lulled into a nap. Hermes rises, his lyre still humming with the fading notes of his song. He approaches Io, his steps light and sure, and with a flick of his hand he severs the silver chain that binds her. Io looks up at him with wide, terrified eyes. Well, as wide as a cow's eyes can get. "Easy now," Hermes whispers, his voice as soft as a feather drifting on the wind. "You're free." And just like that, he guides her away from the sleeping Argus, leading her out of the meadow and back toward freedom. You trail after them, still marveling at the sheer audacity of it all. Some say, though scholars still squabble about whether this detail was added later, that Hermes was so pleased with his trick that he turned it into a song, boasting about how he outwitted the watcher with a lullaby. Frankly, you wouldn't blame him. If you managed to outsmart the most paranoid being in existence, you'd probably brag too. As you follow them into the night, you can't help but grin. The great Argus has fallen, Io is free, and once again, mischief has triumphed over vigilance. But of course, Hera isn't the type to let this sort of thing go unnoticed for long. And you have a feeling the next chapter of this tale will be anything but restful. The night air feels cooler now, as if the very breeze is holding its breath, waiting for Hera's inevitable reaction. You follow closely as Hermes leads Io, the cow with human eyes, through the winding hills, guiding her away from the scene of his bold little heist. Io stumbles along, her hooves unsure on the rocky terrain. Her breaths come in short, panicked bursts, and her ears twitch at every sound, still half expecting Argus to appear behind her, blinking his endless eyes. But Argus isn't coming. He's still snoring peacefully back in the meadow, utterly defeated by Hermes' lullaby. Hermes glances back at her, offering a sly grin. "You know," he says in that smooth, casual tone of his, "you're surprisingly light on your feet for a cow." Io gives a tired, mournful moo in reply. "You're pretty sure it's the bovine equivalent of an eye roll." Hermes just chuckles and keeps leading her onward, through thickets and streams, always moving quickly but quietly, making sure no wandering deity spots them. As you follow, you can't help but think back to all the other stories where Hermes showed up like this, swift, clever, always just barely ahead of disaster. He's got a bit of a reputation after all. Messenger of the gods, patron of travellers, tricksters and thieves. And now apparently cow liberator. But you also know Hera isn't going to let this go. And you're right. Far above, somewhere in the shimmering halls of Olympus, Hera has already discovered what happened. Her sharp eyes have seen Argus asleep on his rock, Io's tether snapped, and Hermes nowhere in sight. You can almost hear her fury echoing across the heavens, a sound like rolling thunder, though no mortal hears it but you. And Hera wastes no time. Suddenly the ground trembles beneath your feet. A gust of wind, sharp and icy, rushes through the valley, nearly knocking you off balance. Io lets out a terrified moo, and even Hermes pauses, his expression tightening. "Oh great," he mutters, glancing skyward. "She's awake." You glance up and see it, a swirling storm forming in the distance, glowing faintly with divine wrath. It's headed straight for you. Hermes curses under his breath and quickens his pace. "We need to move faster," he says, more to himself than anyone else. Hera's not sending flowers this time. You scramble after him as he leads Io through twisting goat paths and hidden ravines, always staying just ahead of the pursuing storm. But Hera isn't merely hurling thunderclouds. She's unleashing something far worse. From the heart of the storm comes a swarm, tiny, glimmering, buzzing shapes that shimmer like golden specks in the air. At first you think they're fireflies, then you hear the buzzing grow louder. Sharper, flies. Hundreds of them. Thousands, perhaps. Not ordinary flies, of course. These are Hera's sacred tormentors. Gadflies, sent to sting and drive Io to madness. You barely have time to react before they descend, a swirling cloud of wings and stingers focused entirely on their target. Poor Io bellows in agony as the first stings land, driving her into a frenzy. She bucks and kicks wildly, nearly knocking Hermes over as she tries to escape the relentless swarm. Hermes raises his hands, shouting a few quick words of magic to shield himself, but even he knows there's no stopping this. "This isn't my fight anymore," he mutters, stepping back. And with a final mournful glance, he vanishes, just like that, leaving Io to her fate. You watch helpless as the swarm drives her forward, forcing her into a desperate, painful run. She charges through forests and across rivers, through valleys and hills, the flies nipping at her relentlessly, pushing her ever onward. You follow as best you can, breathless, watching this tragic spectacle unfold. Some ancient scholars argue that these flies weren't just symbols of torment. They represented guilt, or divine justice, or the price of hubris. Others say they were simply Hera's favorite weapon, a reminder that even the smallest things can destroy giants. Either way, Io's suffering is very real. You can see it in her frantic eyes, hear it in her panicked moves as she races across the landscape, unable to stop, unable to rest. And all the while Hera watches from above, calm and composed, as if this is nothing more than a chess game. You know this can't go on forever. But the question lingers, how far must Io run before her suffering finally ends? You pull your cloak tighter around you, bracing yourself for whatever comes next. Because somehow you can feel it, the worst is still ahead. The chase drags on under the moon's cold gaze, and you find yourself trailing Io across the rugged lands, barely able to keep pace. Her white form blurs through the dark hills, the swarm of divine flies driving her mad with pain. You've never seen anything quite like it. This isn't just a punishment, it's a performance. Io runs through forests where ancient oaks loom overhead, their gnarled branches clawing at the night sky. She crashes through streams, splashing cold water everywhere, but the flies stay with her, relentless and cruel, nipping at her hide with every step. And you're still chasing, stumbling after this chaos, feeling the sting of those same cursed flies whenever you get too close. Hera's wrath isn't exactly selective tonight. Io's journey begins to blur into a twisted, exhausting tour of the known world. You spot her crossing rivers that would someday be named after her, like the Ionian Sea, said to take its name from this very flight. Each place she passes seems to take a piece of her suffering, absorbing it into myth and memory. At one point, you watch her gallop along a narrow strip of land between two seas, her hooves pounding against the earth as the flies drive her forward. This is the Bosphorus, literally meaning cow's passage. You can't help but marvel at how every step she takes is carving her into geography itself. And all the while, her pain doesn't let up. You see her collapse beside a stream, gasping, trembling, her flanks heaving with exhaustion. But the flies swarm again, sending her scrambling to her feet, eyes wild and terrified. You almost feel the urge to step in, to shoo the flies away, to do something. But you know better. Mortals don't meddle in the affairs of gods, not without paying dearly. So you stand back, watching helplessly as she stumbles onward. They say, though some historians are still skeptical, that Io's wild journey took her through lands far beyond Greece, through strange kingdoms and deserts where no Greek had ever set foot. And with each new place, her story grew. In some lands she was whispered about as a sacred cow, a divine wanderer who brought both blessings and curses. In others she was seen as a symbol of endurance, her suffering elevated into something noble. You watch as she wades through muddy marshes, the flies still biting, her eyes glazed with exhaustion. Her legs tremble beneath her, but she keeps moving, driven by pain and fear. It's almost too much to watch, and yet somewhere deep inside, you sense a shift. Hera's fury, once so sharp and immediate, begins to feel distant, fainter. Perhaps even she is tiring of the spectacle. Or perhaps, as some versions of the myth suggest, a higher force is beginning to intervene, fate itself, nudging the story toward its next chapter. Io stumbles again, collapsing on the banks of a wide river. She lies there shuddering, her breath coming in harsh, ragged bursts. The flies still buzz around her, but their frenzy seems to lessen, their attacks slowing as if some invisible hand is pulling them back. You step closer cautiously, watching as Io's body finally begins to relax, if only slightly. Her sides rise and fall, and though she's clearly too weak to run anymore, the worst of the assault seems to have passed. For now. Somewhere high above, you imagine Hera watching, her face unreadable. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about sending a message to Io, to Zeus, to anyone who dared cross her. And you wonder how many others have suffered just like this, caught in the crossfire of divine egos. You crouch beside Io, watching her drift into uneasy sleep, the last few flies buzzing lazily before fading away into the night. For the first time in what feels like forever, the meadow is quiet again. But you know better than to assume this is the end. This is merely a pause. Io's story is far from over, and yours is still unfolding, step by painful step. Dawn begins to break over the distant hills, casting a soft golden glow across the land. You sit nearby, watching as Io stirs, her white coat stained with dust and flecked with dried tears. The flies, thank the gods, have vanished with the night, leaving behind only aching welts and a heart weighed down by sorrow. She slowly rises to her hooves, shaky but determined, her breath fogging in the cool morning air. Her eyes, those terribly human eyes, are clouded with exhaustion. Yet somewhere beneath the pain, there's a flicker of something else. Resolve. She takes a tentative step forward, then another, moving slowly now, no longer fleeing but walking with deliberate purpose. You fall in behind her, your feet crunching softly on the dew-soaked grass. As you follow, you can't help but notice the silence that lingers in the air. No buzzing, no divine music, no mocking laughter from the heavens. Just the quiet sounds of the waking earth. Io's path leads her to a towering mountain range, its peaks dusted with snow, standing like sentinels on the edge of the world. She pauses, gazing up at the cliffs that stretch toward the heavens, as though seeking some sort of guidance. And then you hear it, a voice, low, ancient, and steady as the earth itself. It echoes through the valley, soft at first, but growing clearer with each word. It's the voice of Prometheus, the titan who had been chained to these very cliffs, punished by Zeus for stealing fire and gifting it to mankind. You spot him there, bound by unbreakable chains to the jagged rocks, his body gaunt but his eyes burning with fierce defiance. Despite his own suffering, an eagle perched nearby, ready to resume its gruesome daily task of devouring his liver. Prometheus turns his gaze toward Io. "Poor child," he says, his voice both sympathetic and knowing. You are far from home. Io approaches him cautiously, her hooves slipping slightly on the stony ground. She can't speak, but her eyes, still so full of sorrow, plead with him. Prometheus studies her, and then with a sigh that seems to carry the weight of centuries, he begins to speak. You suffer greatly, he says, but your pain is not without purpose. You lean in closer, hanging on every word. Your torment will not last forever, Prometheus continues. You will wander still, crossing many lands, but in the end, your suffering will cease. He pauses as if weighing his words carefully, then adds, You will reach the land of the Nile, far from here, where Zeus's hand will finally lift your curse. You will return to your human form, and from you will spring a great lineage. Io stares at him, her cow's body tense, as though straining to absorb every word. Prometheus's gaze hardens slightly, his tone deepening. Your descendants will shake the foundations of Olympus itself, he says. One of your bloodline will free me from these chains. Remember that. You feel a chill crawl down your spine at his words. Even in the midst of Io's suffering, fate is weaving something far greater than anyone can see. And despite all he's endured, Prometheus manages the faintest of smiles, a glimmer of pride flickering in his tired eyes. They think they control everything, he mutters, casting a defiant glance toward the heavens. But the threads of destiny slip through even their hands. Io bows her head slightly, as if offering her silent thanks. You stand there watching as this strange moment unfolds, two prisoners, bound by divine cruelty, sharing a brief connection in the shadow of the mountains. Some say, though scholars endlessly debate the details, that this meeting between Io and Prometheus was added later by storytellers who wanted to tie their fates together, weaving their suffering into a single thread of cosmic irony. But as you stand there, watching Io slowly turn away and begin her descent from the mountains, you can't help but feel the power in this encounter. There's something deeply comforting about it too. The idea that even in the cruelest of myths, there are glimpses of hope, whispers of freedom just beyond the horizon. You take one last look at Prometheus, still bound but unbroken, before following Io down the mountain pass. Her journey isn't over, but at last, for the first time in what feels like forever, she knows where she's going. And you can't help but wonder just how far she's willing to go to reclaim herself. You trail after Io as she makes her slow, steady descent from the mountains, her hooves carefully picking their way through narrow, crumbling paths. The morning sun glimmers off the cliffs, casting long shadows, but she doesn't pause to rest. Not anymore. Her meeting with Prometheus seems to have lit something inside her, some stubborn ember of hope that refuses to go out. Her steps may be weary, her body still bruised and stung, but now she walks with purpose. You follow closely, feeling the shift in the air. It's quieter here, far from Olympus, far from the gods' immediate gaze. Even the wind carries a different tone, softer, almost as if it too knows this part of the tale isn't meant to be interrupted. Hours stretch into days, or at least it feels that way, as Io crosses wide valleys and sun-baked plains, always heading east and south, toward the lands where the Nile winds through the earth like a silver serpent. As she travels, you notice something strange. Wherever she passes, the people stop and stare. Farmers drop their tools, herders pause mid-step, and merchants on dusty roads bow their heads, whispering to one another as she approaches. To them she isn't just a wandering cow. She's an omen, a divine sign. Some kneel as she passes, others leave small offerings of fruit or grain along the roadside, murmuring prayers in ancient tongues you barely recognize. And though Io can't speak, You see it in her eyes. She notices too. She's no longer a victim here. In these lands, she's something more. Some ancient scholars believe this was how her legend first began to take root outside Greece. As she wandered through foreign lands, her story spread like wildfire, morphing with every retelling. In some places she was a cursed maiden seeking redemption, in others she became a sacred cow, a bringer of prosperity and fertility. It's funny, you think, how suffering can be twisted into reverence, how torment can birth worship. You walk alongside her as she crosses yet another river, its waters cool and clear, reflecting the bright midday sun. She pauses to drink, and for a moment there's peace again. But not for long. You hear it before you see it, a faint buzzing on the horizon. Your heart sinks. The flies have returned. Not in the same frenzied swarm as before, but persistent nonetheless, circling her head, nipping at her ears and flanks, driving her forward once again. Io lets out a low, pained bellow, and though she tries to resist, the instinct to flee takes over. She bolts from the river bank, crashing through reeds and brush, her hooves kicking up clouds of dust. You chase after her, the landscape blurring around you as she runs, through farmlands, across bridges, past stone temples whose carvings seem to watch her silently. Still, the flies won't relent. It's almost comical in its cruelty. After everything she's endured, after escaping Hera's watchful eyes and Argus's gaze, she's still being driven by these tiny, merciless creatures. You can't help but mutter under your breath, Hera really knows how to hold a grudge. And indeed, many storytellers over the centuries have said the same. Hera's wrath wasn't a storm that passed quickly. It was a slow, grinding force, relentless and patient, like erosion wearing down a mountain. Still, even gods can't pursue forever. As Io stumbles onward, driven yet again to the brink of collapse, something in the air begins to change. You smell it first, a dry, warm scent, tinged with salt, and the faintest hint of lotus. The Nile. It lies just ahead, winding its way through the desert, like a great blue ribbon. Io's pace quickens, her instincts pulling her towards it. And suddenly, as her hooves touch the river's edge, something remarkable happens. The flies vanish, gone as if they'd never existed. The air grows still and heavy, but not with fear. This time it feels sacred. Io stands at the river bank, her sides heaving, her legs trembling, but she doesn't move. Instead, she gazes at her reflection in the water. You watch from the shore, barely daring to breathe. The Nile glistens beneath the afternoon sun, and Io's reflection stares back at her, haunted, exhausted, yet unbroken. Some say it was at this very spot that Zeus at last intervened, not out of mercy, but because fate itself had dictated it was time. Others claim that Hera, satisfied that her point had been made, finally relented. Either way, Io's torment is nearing its end. You can feel it in your bones. And as the first ripples of divine magic begin to shimmer across the water's surface, you know the next moment will change everything. But even here, in this quiet pause before transformation, you can't help but reflect on how far she's come. From the temples of Greece to the sands of Egypt, from priestess to cow to something else entirely. Her story is carved into rivers and mountains now. And somehow, despite everything, she's still standing. You take one last, steady breath. The next step of her journey is about to begin. The air shimmers with an almost electric stillness as you stand by the Nile, watching Io stare into her reflection. Her sides still heave from the long, agonizing chase, and her body remains marred by the sting of Hera's flies. But there's something different now. The flies are gone. The pain has quieted. The pain, and above all else, the magic in the air feels undeniable. You glance up, half expecting to see Zeus himself descending from the heavens in a dramatic show of lightning and thunder. But there's no grand entrance, no booming declarations or swirling storm clouds. Instead, everything remains quiet, eerily quiet. Then, in the faintest ripple upon the river's surface, you feel it. Divine presence. Zeus has arrived, not in form, but in will. And in that moment, you understand. This is no longer a battle of wills between Hera and her husband. This is the weight of fate settling into place, inevitable and unstoppable. Io trembles as the magic washes over her, a soft golden light that rises from the water, wrapping around her like a warm breeze. You watch transfixed as the transformation begins. Her cow's form shimmers and shifts, her hooves melting back into delicate hands, her white fur dissolving into soft, olive-toned skin. Her snout recedes, her face reshaping, becoming once more that of the woman she was. Io, the priestess, now returned to her human form. She stumbles to her knees at the water's edge, gasping for breath, her hair tangled and wild, her body fragile and worn from her ordeal. But she's free, truly free. You approach slowly, careful not to startle her. Her eyes meet yours, still haunted, but undeniably human now. There's recognition in her gaze, though you doubt she could explain how or why you've been present through her journey. She doesn't speak, she doesn't need to. Somewhere in the still air, you hear the faintest whisper of Zeus's voice, not spoken aloud, but carried on the wind. It is done. You glance around, half expecting Hera to swoop in and spoil this fragile peace. But she doesn't. Perhaps even she knows when enough is enough. As Io rises unsteadily to her feet, you notice something remarkable about her. Despite all she's endured, despite the pain, the humiliation, the endless torment, there's a quiet strength in her now. She doesn't look like a victim, she looks like a survivor. And there, standing by the Nile, she becomes something else entirely. A symbol of endurance, of transformation, of the quiet resilience mortals rarely get credit for in the grand, messy stories of the gods. You've heard some scholars argue over the centuries about what this moment really meant. Was it redemption? Forgiveness? A political truce between divine forces? Or was it simply the end of one tale, making way for another? After all, Io's story doesn't end here. The whispers of fate remain. It said she would go on to marry an Egyptian king, becoming a revered queen, worshipped as a goddess under new names and new myths. And her descendants? Well, they would change everything. You stare out across the Nile, your thoughts drifting like the slow current of the river. Her bloodline would stretch far and wide, heroes, kings, and even demigods born from her legacy. And eventually, as Prometheus foretold, one of her distant descendants would return to Greece, shaking Olympus itself and altering the course of history forever. But that's a tale for another night. For now, you remain beside Io as she gazes out over the river, her reflection finally her own again. The sun sinks lower in the sky, casting everything in a golden hue. Villagers nearby begin to light their evening fires, unaware that a living myth stands mere paces from their doors. You take a deep breath, feeling the magic of the moment settle into your bones. This story, her story, is etched in your memory now, as surely as it's carved into the landscape. And though the gods may continue their squabbles, and mortals may keep retelling this tale in countless ways, you know you've witnessed the quiet truth beneath it all. Pain passes, stories linger, and some journeys, no matter how strange, lead home. You close your eyes, letting the fading warmth of the sun wash over you, knowing that the next steps belong to Io alone. Her suffering is over. Her legend has just begun. Night settles over the Nile, blanketing the riverbanks in soft shadows. The air hums with the quiet sounds of evening. Frogs croaking in the reeds, distant laughter from unseen villages, and the slow, steady current of the water itself. You sit nearby, watching Io as she rests beneath a cluster of date palms, her face illuminated by the flickering light of a small campfire. Her hair is loose now, falling around her shoulders in dark, tangled waves. Her expression is calm, tired certainly, but peaceful in a way you haven't seen before. She's no longer running, no longer hunted, no longer trapped within the body of a cow. And yet as you sit there with her, you can feel it. The weight of her story isn't gone. It lingers in the air like smoke, curling through the night sky. She doesn't speak, but her silence says enough. Her journey has carved itself deep into her, and though the gods may have released her body, they can't erase what she remembers. You lean back, staring up at the stars overhead. They shimmer with a cold, distant beauty, their patterns familiar, and yet somehow different here in the Egyptian night. And then it happens. As if the heavens themselves wish to remind you that no tale in this world is ever truly over. A new shape begins to take form among the stars, faint at first, but growing clearer with each passing moment. You blink, unsure if you're dreaming, but the image sharpens nonetheless. A bull. The stars align slowly, meticulously, until they form the unmistakable outline of a great horned creature, its body arched as if mid-leap across the sky. The constellation. Taurus. You glance toward Io, wondering if she notices it too, but her eyes remain fixed on the fire, steady and calm, as though she's already aware. It's said, though no one truly agrees when the tale first emerged, that Zeus, in an unusual fit of sentiment, placed a tribute to Io among the stars, not out of guilt, of course. The gods rarely deal in such trivial mortal emotions. But perhaps as a reminder of the lengths Hera would go to, of the chaos his desires could unleash, of the mortal woman who, despite it all, survived every trial thrown her way. You stare at the constellation, watching as it gleams softly against the velvet sky. It's beautiful in its own way, but you can't help but smirk. Imagine that, after everything she endured, after all the suffering and madness and running from divine flies, her great cosmic reward is to be turned into a celestial lawn ornament. It's almost too ridiculous to be real. But that's Greek mythology for you. Equal parts grandeur and absurdity. You watch the constellation a moment longer before your gaze drifts back to Io. She's still gazing into the fire, lost in her own thoughts. And you wonder, does she feel comfort in seeing her form immortalized above? Or does it sting, knowing that her suffering has been forever stitched into the fabric of the sky? Some say, though scholars endlessly debate this, of course, that Io's transformation into a star was seen as a kind of strange honor, a reward of sorts. But you can't help but suspect that it wasn't meant to glorify her suffering. It was a warning, a quiet reminder glowing in the heavens that the gods were always watching, and that mortals were never far from becoming pawns in their games. Still, as you sit there, you feel something unexpected, something gentle. Hope. Io has endured every torment imaginable. She has wandered across continents, crossed seas, faced monsters, tricksters, and divine wrath. And here she is, still breathing, still whole. Her story, like the stars above, is far from finished. And in her silence, in the way she gazes at the flames, you sense it too. Somewhere deep within, she's already begun weaving the next chapter of her life. Not as a victim, not as a pawn, but as something else entirely. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders, leaning back against the earth, the cool sand cradling you as the fire crackles softly beside her. Above you, the stars spin slowly on their endless journey, and you realize this is not the end of the story. Not for Io, not for you, and certainly not for the gods who are always waiting for their next opportunity to stir the pot again. But tonight, the river is quiet. The stars are steady. And for the first time in what feels like forever, you allow yourself to drift, slowly, gently into sleep, knowing that at least for now, everything is exactly where it should be. The soft crackle of the fire lulls you deeper into the calm of the night, but somewhere in the quiet, you sense movement. You blink your eyes open just in time to see Io rise from her seat beneath the palms. She moves slowly, gracefully, like someone who's shed an old, heavy skin. Her gaze isn't fixed on the flames anymore. It's drawn toward the horizon, where the Nile shimmers under the light of the moon. You watch as she steps closer to the water's edge, her bare feet leaving soft impressions in the cool sand. The river is calm, its current gentle, as though it too is weary from witnessing so many stories flow through its banks. Io kneels beside the water, cupping her hands to drink. And you realize something profound. She's no longer fleeing, she's no longer hiding. She belongs here now. As she drinks from the Nile, it's as though the land itself accepts her presence, weaving her into its tapestry of myths and legends. You've heard whispers before, legends spun in distant lands, that Io's journey didn't end simply with freedom from Hera's torment. No, the stories say she remained in Egypt, where the locals revered her, not as a cursed wanderer, but as a goddess. And here, now, you see it unfolding before your eyes. Io, the woman who had once been hunted across continents, begins to glow, not with divine magic, but with a quiet human radiance born from survival. Her skin gleams under the moonlight, her hair shimmering like dark silk, her posture strong yet serene. You watch as the people of a nearby village approach her slowly, their eyes wide with reverence. They carry baskets of offerings, figs, bread, jars of honeyed wine, and lay them gently at her feet. Io doesn't speak, but she accepts their presence with grace, her hands lifted in gentle blessing. It's strange, you think. Once she was just a priestess, an attendant of Hera, devoted and obedient. Then she became a victim, a pawn in the petty quarrels of gods. Now she's something entirely different, a symbol of transformation, a goddess in her own right. You hear one of the villagers murmur her name in a new way. Isis. And a shiver runs down your spine. Many tales from distant lands blend together, after all. Some say Io became associated with the goddess Isis, a figure of fertility and magic, worshipped along the banks of this very river. Others insist that's just coincidence, the way old stories merge and shift like the river's ever-changing course. But as you watch her standing there, tall, calm, unbroken, you begin to understand why such connections were drawn. After all, what better candidate for a goddess than someone who has walked through every circle of suffering and emerged standing? You smile to yourself, feeling the weight of it all settle into place. It's almost funny, isn't it? Zeus may have caused her torment, Hera may have unleashed her fury. But in the end, neither of them owns Io's story. She does. And now so do the people who look to her for guidance, for healing, for hope. As you sit in the quiet glow of this newfound peace, you reflect on the strange irony of it all. Many historians still argue about the real meaning behind Io's tale. Was it about divine jealousy, a warning against tempting fate, a lesson in endurance? You suspect the truth is far simpler. It's about survival, about how no matter how high the gods may sit, It's the mortals who carry the stories forward. You watch as Io accepts the offerings, her smile soft but knowing, and you realize that her tale has already begun to change, twisting into something brighter, stronger. She's no longer a victim etched in tragedy. She's a goddess now, reborn through fire, fury, and the long, winding roads of destiny. And as the villagers light lanterns in her honor, their flames flickering like tiny stars along the Nile, you realize something else too. This night, this quiet moment, isn't just a pause in her journey. It's the beginning of something entirely new. A story that will ripple through generations, long after you and every god have faded. You pull your cloak around you, staring into the river's reflection, and for the first time since this journey began, you feel something unexpected. Closure. Io is home. And so, in some strange way, are you? Morning arrives slowly, the sky softening from deep indigo to a delicate gold. You sit near the riverbank, watching the first light of dawn stretch over the horizon, casting long shadows across the Nile's glimmering surface. Io stands nearby, still wrapped in the quiet of her newfound role. Her presence is calm now, steady as the current, yet something about her feels distant. Not in a cold or detached way, but like someone who's no longer bound by the ordinary flow of time and suffering. She has become something else entirely. You watch as villagers begin their day, bringing baskets of offerings, dates, pomegranates, honey, fragrant oils, laying them at her feet. They bow low, whispering prayers in languages that drift like river mist, and Io, she accepts them all without a word, her hands raised gently in blessing, her gaze soft and serene. It strikes you then. She isn't just being worshipped here. She is the land now. Her story has woven itself into the very fabric of these fields and waters. Her pain has become their hope, her survival their comfort. You can almost hear the stories already beginning to shift, passed from lips to eager ears in the village square. The sacred woman who crossed seas and deserts, the blessed cow who brought fertility to the barren lands, the goddess who emerged from suffering to offer protection and prosperity. And somewhere deep beneath it all, her true name lingers, Io. A name carried like a secret through the roots of these tales, hidden beneath new titles and divine epithets. You smile faintly at the irony. The gods may have tossed her around like a pawn, but here, among mortals, she holds the power. Her journey was never about their games. It was about endurance. You watch as she walks slowly toward the river again, trailing her fingers through the reeds, her face calm as ever. And that's when it hits you. Her story didn't just survive, it changed. It grew beyond the control of gods and titans alike. Some say, though of course the historians will never agree, that this was always the fate of myths. They aren't meant to be trapped in marble temples or inscribed on dusty scrolls. They are meant to move, to shift, to belong to those who need them most. And Io's story? It now belongs to every farmer who hopes for rain, every mother who whispers a prayer for her child's safety, every traveller who looks to the river and wonders what other mysteries lie beyond the horizon. Her suffering has melted into something timeless, and as you sit there, watching her gaze out over the waters, you realize something else. She knew it would. That's the quiet brilliance of her survival. Not just the endurance of her body or her will, but the quiet certainty that her pain would one day mean more than just a memory of torment. It would become a seed, one that would grow slowly and steadily into something that outlived every god who once toyed with her fate. You lean back, staring up at the pale morning sky, feeling the weight of that realization settle in your chest. Somewhere high above, you imagine Zeus watching, perhaps feeling smug that his offspring would go on to greatness. Somewhere else Hera may be watching too, perhaps frowning, realizing that her punishment has blossomed into reverence. But neither of them can stop it now. Io's story is free. And as she walks through the fields, the villagers following her like gentle shadows, you can't help but feel a strange peace. This part of her journey may be over, but her story is only just beginning. And somehow you're certain it will echo far beyond anything the gods themselves could have ever predicted. As the day stretches on, the sun rises higher, bathing the land in a soft golden haze. The Nile glitters beneath its rays, winding through the earth like a ribbon of liquid light. You find yourself walking quietly behind Io, following her through the fields where crops sway gently in the breeze. She moves with ease now, her steps slow but deliberate, as though she's walking not just through the land, but through time itself. Everywhere she goes, people gather. Farmers pause in their work to watch her pass, their faces filled with reverence. Children run alongside her, laughing and offering garlands of woven reeds and wild flowers, which she accepts with a serene smile. The villagers don't fear her, they adore her, and you begin to see why. It's not simply because they've heard whispers of her suffering or her strange divine past. It's because she stands before them now, not as a distant deity or a figure of untouchable power, but as someone who understands them. She has suffered, she has wandered, she has endured, and now in their eyes she belongs to them, not to Olympus, not to the heavens, but to this earth, to this river, to these people. You watch as she stops beneath the shade of a large sycamore tree, resting her hand against its smooth bark. The villagers gather around her, quiet and expectant. And then, in the softest voice, barely more than a breath, she speaks. "My journey has ended here," she says, her words carrying across the gathered crowd like a gentle wind. "But my story is yours to carry." The villagers bow their heads, their eyes shining with understanding. You feel something shift in that moment, a subtle but undeniable turning point. Io is no longer just a survivor. She's a guide, a beacon. And as she stands beneath the tree, her figure framed by the river and the sky, it feels as though you're witnessing the birth of something new, something ancient and eternal, all at once. The people begin to sing then, soft melodic chants that rise and fall like the tide. Their voices blend with the rustling of the reeds, the song of distant birds, the gentle lapping of the Nile against the shore. And Io simply listens, her eyes half closed, her face calm. You sit nearby, letting the music wash over you, feeling its steady rhythm seep into your bones. Somewhere deep inside, you know this song will carry her name for generations to come. It will cross deserts and seas, winding its way through temples and markets, whispered in the dark corners of homes and shouted in the bright squares of cities. It will change, of course, as all stories do. Perhaps in some versions she will become a goddess of motherhood or of the harvest. Perhaps others will call her the protector of rivers or the guardian of lost travelers. But no matter how the words shift, no matter what new names are given to her, the heart of her story will remain. Endurance, survival, hope, and as the song continues, you feel something else settle into your chest. A quiet certainty that you too were meant to carry this story forward. That's how it works after all. The gods may weave their tangled webs, but it's mortals who tell the tales, who pass them down, who decide what lives on. And you know without doubt that Io's story will never fade. It will echo through the ages, woven into every river, every field, every star-filled sky. And tonight, as the sun dips once more toward the horizon, painting the land in hues of amber and rose, you'll rest beneath this same sycamore tree, knowing you've been part of something far greater than yourself. You'll sleep deeply, wrapped in the warmth of the earth, the sound of singing fading into dreams. And when you wake, Io will still be there, her story alive, her legend unfolding, carried on the breath of every breeze. Because some stories were never meant to end. As twilight begins to fall, the village grows quiet again. The day's songs drift away with the setting sun, leaving behind the gentle sounds of crickets and the soft splash of fish jumping in the Nile. You sit beneath the sycamore tree, the same spot where Io stood earlier, feeling the warmth of the earth beneath you. The villagers have returned to their homes, but their reverence lingers in the air like incense. Io remains near the river, her silhouette outlined by the fading light, watching the waters flow steadily past. There's something mesmerizing about the way she watches the current, as though she can see not just the river itself, but all the lives it will touch, all the stories it will carry. You approach her slowly, drawn by something you can't quite explain. She doesn't speak as you sit beside her. She simply offers a faint smile, her expression soft but distant, as though her thoughts are somewhere far beyond the horizon. And as the first stars begin to pierce the dusky sky, you feel the weight of something larger settling around you. Destiny. Legacy. You glance up and spot it again. That familiar constellation, Taurus, shining bright above the river. A quiet reminder of all she has endured. You can't help but wonder if she ever grows weary of seeing it there, night after night. A glowing reminder of her past suffering immortalized for all eternity. But when you glance at her, you see no bitterness in her gaze. Only peace. She speaks at last, her voice calm and low, like the river's own song. "They thought they could end me," she says, her words drifting on the cool night breeze. "That I would break, that I would disappear." Her eyes flick toward the constellation above, watching it slow dance across the heavens. "But here I am," she continues, a faint smile curling at the corners of her lips. "Still here, still whole, and they are only stories now." You feel the truth of her words settle deep in your bones. Zeus, Hera, Hermes, once towering figures of power and control, now reduced to names, to fading echoes in tales spun by firelight. But Io, she remains. Here, in the soil, in the river, in the hearts of every person who whispers her name. And suddenly it all makes sense. Her story wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about becoming something greater than either of those things, about transcending pain and turning it into something lasting. You sit in silence with her, letting the weight of that truth sink in. Above you, the stars continue their slow, steady arc across the sky. Around you, the world rests peacefully, wrapped in the quiet hum of night. And beside you, Io watches it all, her presence as steady and certain as the earth itself. Some ancient storytellers, those dusty old philosophers, used to argue about the purpose of myths like hers. They'd debate endlessly, wondering whether such tales were warnings or lessons, entertainment or explanations. But you know better now. Some stories aren't meant to be analysed. They're meant to be felt, carried, remembered. And tonight, beneath the soft shimmer of starlight, you realise you'll never forget hers. Io, the woman who became a wanderer, a cow, a goddess, a legend, still here, still whole, still watching the river flow. And as sleep begins to pull at your eyelids, you allow yourself to drift with it, wrapped in the comfort of her quiet presence, knowing that her story will flow on long after you've faded into dreams. Night deepens, wrapping the land in a thick, velvety darkness. and yet the Nile continues its soft murmur, flowing steadily under the moon's gaze. The stars above seem to pulse brighter now, their cold silver light scattered across the black canvas of the sky. You're still seated beside Io, lulled by the rhythm of the river, your body relaxed, yet your mind lingering on everything you've witnessed. She sits in silence too, gazing out toward the horizon where land and water meet, her eyes reflecting the starlight. And then softly she begins to speak again, not to you exactly, but to the air, to the night itself. There was a time, she murmurs, her voice slow and calm, when I believed my suffering would be the only story I'd leave behind. She doesn't look at you. Her gaze remains fixed on the river, as though she's watching her past drift away with the current. I thought I would be remembered as the girl who ran, she continues, her tone gentle but steady. The girl who fled, who was cursed, who wore the shape of a beast. You listen, captivated by the quiet weight of her words. But I see it now, she says, her lips curling into the faintest smile. Suffering isn't the end of a story. It's only the middle. Her fingers trace slow, idle patterns in the sand beside her, as if marking invisible paths. Perhaps roads she's travelled, rivers she's crossed, mountains she's climbed. You realize she's not just recalling her story, she's redefining it, reclaiming it. I carried their wrath across every horizon, she says, her voice growing softer, more distant. But I also carried something they could never touch. She turns toward you then, her eyes calm but piercing, her gaze holding yours with quiet certainty. Hope, she says simply. The one thing even the gods can't crush. Her words settle over you, like a warm blanket in the cool night air. And you realize with sudden clarity how right she is. Hope isn't loud. It isn't dramatic or swift like Zeus's lightning bolts or Hera's vengeful storms. It's quiet, steady. It moves like the Nile itself, carving through stone, slipping through cracks, always flowing forward, no matter how many obstacles are thrown in its path. You watch Io rise slowly from the river bank, her figure silhouetted against the soft glow of the stars. She moves with grace, her body no longer weighed down by the burden of her past. Instead, she seems lighter, as if she's finally stepped out of the long shadow cast by those who sought to control her. She begins to walk along the river's edge, her steps unhurried, her white garments catching the breeze like wings. You rise too, compelled to follow. Together you walk in silence, each step matching the steady rhythm of the flowing water. And as you walk, you realize something else. This isn't an ending at all. It's a continuation. Her story flows onward through every person who remembers her, through every field watered by the Nile, through every whispered prayer carried on the wind. It lives in you now too. You've seen it, felt it, carried it. And somewhere deep within, you know you'll carry it for the rest of your days. Io, the girl who was hunted, the woman who endured, the goddess who rose beyond her torment. Her name will echo long after these stars burn out. Io pauses and turns her gaze to the heavens. Above, Taurus still shines, its horns gleaming sharply against the black sky. You've noticed it before, of course, but this time, under her gaze, it feels different. I used to hate it, she says softly, her voice almost lost in the wind. That constellation. You glance up again, watching the stars glimmer in quiet indifference. For a long time, it felt like a cruel joke, she continues, her words steady but tinged with something deeper. A reminder of everything I was forced to endure, pinned in the sky where I could never escape it. She falls silent for a moment, watching the stars with an unreadable expression. But I see it differently now, she says at last, her voice carrying a note of quiet wonder. It's not a punishment, it's a reminder. She gestures toward the stars, her hand graceful and sure. That I endured, she says simply. You feel her words settle inside you, like a stone dropped gently into deep water, rippling outward in slow, steady waves. I survived, she continues, her eyes still fixed on the sky. And now I light the way for others who wander. Her words are soft, but there's a power in them, the kind that lingers long after the sound has faded. You realize then that she no longer sees herself as a victim of the gods' whims. She's become something far more enduring. A guide, a symbol, a star in her own right. She smiles faintly, as if hearing your thoughts. They can tell the story however they wish, she murmurs, lowering her gaze back to the earth. But the truth is simpler. She steps forward into the meadow, her bare feet brushing through the tall grasses, and her voice drifts back to you. I walk through storms, she says. I crossed seas, bore curses, outlasted monsters and gods alike. She turns to look at you then, her eyes steady, her face illuminated by starlight. And I'm still walking. Her words strike something deep inside you, because she isn't boasting. She isn't seeking pity. She's simply stating a fact. Her endurance isn't dramatic. It's quiet, patient, and unstoppable, like the slow carving of rivers through stone. You watch as she continues walking, disappearing slowly into the shadows of the swaying grass, her figure growing smaller beneath the wide open sky. And you understand something else. This is how stories last, not through thunderous endings or final battles, but through simple, persistent motion, step after step, story after story, passed on through quiet voices beneath the stars. You remain in the meadow, standing still, feeling the earth beneath your feet, watching the place where she vanished. You know she'll keep walking, across fields, through centuries, into every heart that needs her. Her story won't end here. It won't ever end. Because some stories become rivers, some become stars, and some, like Io's, become both. The wind grows cooler as you stand alone in the meadow, the tall grasses whispering all around you. The stars above drift onward in their slow, silent course, and though Io's figure has long since faded into the shadows, her presence still lingers, warm and steady, like a soft ember that refuses to burn out. You sit down amid the grass, watching the night sky, and you can almost feel her footsteps imprinted on the earth beneath you, like faint echoes still humming through the soil. Her words replay in your mind. I'm still walking. Simple, unshaken, true. It's strange how her story, once so full of chaos and torment, has grown quieter now, calmer. It no longer feels like a tale of curses or rage. It feels like something universal. You glance at the constellation again. Taurus, still glowing with that soft, cold light. And for the first time, you don't see it as a cruel reminder of her suffering. You see it as a landmark, a steady flame in the dark sky, guiding wanderers and dreamers alike, marking the way through their own storms. And it dawns on you, her story isn't just about Io anymore, it's about every journey, every person who's run from something too big to fight, every heart that's been trapped, reshaped and freed again, every soul that's had to carry pain across long, lonely miles. She's not just walking through the meadows of the Nile, she's walking through you, through everyone who's ever felt lost or hunted or small. You close your eyes for a moment, breathing in the cool night air, and you feel that quiet truth settle deep into your chest. Somewhere out there, Io is still walking, across forgotten deserts, through distant lands, along rivers whose names she doesn't yet know. Her feet press into the earth with every step, and with each one her story grows, spreading like ripples through time, through language, through every whispered telling by fireside or temple wall. And you realize now it's no accident that her tale keeps returning to rivers, to flowing water. Her story is a river, winding endlessly through valleys and hills, carving its path gently but firmly through stone, always moving forward, even when it vanishes from sight. You sit in silence, letting that realization wash over you, and a small smile finds its way to your lips. There's something deeply comforting about it. To know that no matter where you go, no matter how lost you feel, somewhere her story is flowing alongside you. And perhaps that's the true heart of every myth. Not the gods, not the curses, not even the magic, but the quiet, persistent current of survival that runs through it all. You lie back in the meadow, staring up at the stars, feeling the ground hold you steady beneath its weight. Somewhere far away, Io's journey continues. And here, in this quiet place, you understand your role now too. You're not just a witness, you're a carrier of her story. And when others feel lost, when their burdens grow too heavy, you'll have something to offer them. A story about a woman who kept walking, who endured, who became a goddess not by force, but by moving forward, one step at a time. And beneath the soft hum of the night wind, you murmur it to yourself. She's still walking. And somehow, you know, so are you. The stars drift ever onward, their ancient light casting faint silver trails across the meadow. You remain lying in the soft grass, watching them wheel slowly overhead, wrapped in the lingering warmth of Io's presence. The night grows deeper, quieter. Even the wind has stilled, as if the world itself is pausing, listening. And you listen too, your breath slowing as your thoughts settle like dust after a storm. Somewhere, far beyond your sight, you know she is still walking, her feet tracing paths that no map could ever capture. But even here, even now, her story hums all around you, woven into the air, into the earth beneath your back, into the soft, steady rhythm of your heartbeat. The lines between her story and yours blur, gently, until you can no longer tell where one ends and the other begins. And you realize something else. Her journey was never meant to be a closed circle, neatly tied off with an ending. It was always meant to continue, passed on from voice to voice, from heart to heart, from dream to dream. You let your eyes drift closed, the stars painting soft shapes behind your eyelids, and you remember her words, as clear as if she were whispering them into the night once more. I'm still walking. You take a deep breath, letting the quiet fill you. In the far distance you imagine rivers winding through deserts, across mountains, through forests and hidden valleys, endless and unyielding, carrying her story forward. Carrying you forward too. You feel yourself growing heavier now, your body sinking deeper into the grass, your limbs softening as sleep begins to draw you gently down. But your thoughts drift on, calm and slow, flowing like a river through the dark. You picture Io, forever moving, forever becoming something more than what the gods intended, more than a victim, more than a symbol, more than a name in the stars. You picture her as something simple and yet extraordinary, a reminder that no matter how long the night lasts, no matter how winding the road becomes, you can always take one more step, you can always keep walking. And in that final thought, as your breath deepens and your body lets go, you feel it. A soft, soothing sense of closure. Not an ending, but a peaceful pause. A resting place along the river's edge, safe and quiet, where you can stop for a while. And as your mind drifts further towards sleep, you hear her voice again, faint and far away, carried on the wind. You're not alone. The stars soften, the river flows on, and the world fades gently, sweetly into quiet. End of script. Sweet dreams.